Hi, it's Zeff Reeves here. I'm the Managing Director of Tesoro Resources. Tesoro is a Chilean-focused gold developer. We've got a gold asset in the Atacama region of Chile, which we're currently drilling out and looking for a maiden resource estimate coming up very soon, and pushing our project through its next phase of development.
Hey Zeff, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Yourself?
All good here. Summer's on its way, I'm told. But I wanted to speak to you. I saw some drill results out, so I think that's really good. But I also saw the market had not reacted particularly positively. So it was kind of like a meh moment. I wanted to understand why. What's happening?
Well, good question. I'm not sure. I don't get to control the market, unfortunately. We can only keep doing what we're doing, producing positive drill results, continue to grow our deposit. Things are going pretty well on track and on schedule. Our guys are busily drilling away, and we're in the background preparing everything for a maiden resource estimate. And as I said, unfortunately, we can't control things outside of the company and the market. But look, I think there's probably on the flip side of that, it makes Tesoro pretty good value buying, I think, based on what we've got on our hands and, the trajectory that we've set ourselves on.
There's a little bit of talk about Chilean politics at the moment, because you kind of got a couple of things happening. You've got some basically primaries in July, next month. You've also got the federal elections in November. I think people are a bit nervous about some of the statements coming out of some of the politicians at the moment. Would that be right?
It's an unusual political environment for sure. At the moment in Chile, those general elections are coming up in November. But in the same time, there's been a recent election of the Constitutional Congress, which is going to debate and try to reform the existing Chilean constitution. So I think that's a good thing. It's going to probably change the way that the parliament operates and our people are elected. We don't see any other major changes really on that agenda and what that Congress has been mandated for. And look, general elections are normally fairly tightly contested in Chile between, your typical right side of politics and a more left-leaning side of politics. So look, just a wait and see for us. We don't expect the landscape to change massively in regards to what we're doing and foreign investment and developing gold projects.
I mean, people look back to 2019. Rioting on the streets, the youth were disenfranchised, it felt, and people looking into Chile might have been slightly nervous that, this was going to be destructive of it's a very sort of institutional country and rule of law is very important to them, but that kind of sent a few shockwaves through the markets at the time. Do you think we're returning back to something like that?
No, I don't think so. I think that was, I suppose, the symptom of deeper underlying issues within the Chilean electorate and population. Let's not forget that I suppose at heart Chile is still probably a socialist leaning type country. It's got a large working class and so on. So what we saw back in 2018 was a reaction to ongoing tensions, I suppose, of not being heard and this disgruntlement where there's a larger gap emerging between, the upper class and everybody else. And a lot of that's to do with the way parliamentarians are elected to govern the country and then how they actually do govern the country on both sides of politics. So the impetus or the result of that, if you like, is probably this constitutional reform that was proposed and is now in train. So I think, looking at the results of that, a majority of the Chilean population tend to agree that a constitutional reform is a good thing and to be a progressive democratic society.
But the thing that people are reacting to in the investment community, so when it comes to natural resources, some of the proposed tax hikes on copper companies. It's a big copper producing country. and what the implications could be for gold companies further down the line.
Yeah, look, we're not that concerned around any of that kind of stuff. A lot of that is political posturing and so on. So, we expect that there's going to be some change, and a small change in increase in tax is probably on the table. Whatever's proposed and whatever's reported in the media is likely to get heavily watered down. And it's not dissimilar to what's going on in Australia right now, particularly Western Australia, with a booming iron ore price, and our local state government here making noises around the fact that they'd like a bit more of that pie, if you like. So I think ultimately what we'll see at the end of the day for the copper industry in Chile is that the industry was likely to get taxed more in line with other jurisdictions around the world. Obviously, they're coming up a pretty low base at the moment. How that impacts the gold industry, look, there's no impact in the near future for us for any gold production out of Chile. That's certainly not on the agenda as far as we know.
Well, it's interesting, actually. Since we spoke, and I've spoken to a couple of other Chilean companies, I wanted to find out for ourselves, rather than listen to you. See, you guys have got to talk a certain rhetoric, right? We spoke to a Chilean ambassador, a Chilean Natural Resources lawyer, journalist, politician, and in fact, even the president of the Mining Association in Chile. He might be a little bit biased, but maybe. But with regards to these proposed tax hikes, I think they all put it down to political posturing during sort of election season, as it were. So that was kind of interesting that to a man and to a woman, they were kind of quite uniform in the way that they viewed this. And the reason we wanted to dig a little bit deeper, because we've seen this with election season in Ecuador and Peru, sort of in Mexico to a degree, we've seen in Argentina to a degree. So it's always the same patterns that's followed, and then eventually things return back to the way they were, or nearly the way they were. So it kind of gave us some confidence about investing in Chile, that once we get through the political season here, things will be back to norm. But your ability to do business between now and getting the elections over, which is going to be November, and then the transition, which will happen in Q1 next year. Have you got enough money to do what you're doing? Have any barriers been put in front of you that are going to slow you down?
Yes, we have got plenty of money to do what we want to do. So, as I said, we're on that course to a maiden resource estimate out of Tenera, the deposit at our Zorro that we're drilling. We would say that is a stepping stone to greater resource growth, which we'd expect to see later in the year. So we're funded to do all of that drilling and that expansion work, and from what we're saying, we'd expect a considerable upgrade in the resource size towards the end of the year, and also funded to do a scoping study over the project at some time this year. In terms of barriers to operating, the only barriers that we see from time to time that our guys are doing very well at managing at the moment is COVID. So, and that's usually to do with supply chain and logistics type issues due to restrictions in movement of people and goods. So outside of that, it's business as usual for us. We don't have any impediments to what we want to do.
Okay, so you got the money, no impediments. So we better talk about these drill results then that we've been looking at. And you put out all the drill results in the last press release, but there's a few that kind of stuck out for you. Was it sort of what you were expecting to see?
Yeah, I suppose what we're starting to see, particularly with, we're making reference to it in our announcements now. And I think last time we spoke, we've done a lot of work, but we're making a lot of reference in our announcements now around the controlling north-south fault systems. So what we're obviously doing in preparation for the maiden resource estimate is modelling those. We've got a iterative grade model of the deposit, if you like, so we kind of can see where things are heading. And those north-south faults are really starting to come together. And when the guys are targeting those to drill them, we're seeing these, particularly in that southern portion of the deposit, some really high-grade hits coming out of those. So we're seeing assays greater than 30 grams a tonne coming out of 1 or 2 metres of core, and then around that a larger, wider halo of sort of anywhere from 1 to say 4 or 5 grams. So that's starting to become quite a consistent feature that we're seeing through those fault zones. We've drilled 3 of those fault zones quite well so far, and we've got another one that we've just put a few holes into, but that's starting to come together quite nicely as well. And we'd see those fault zones as, I guess, forming a good basis for a bulk of the ounces in the deposit, and certainly offering a good opportunity from a mining perspective to kick off on some, high-grade material straight away. They're at surface, and we've drilled them right down to 400 metres depth. So the more we drill those, the better they're hanging together. So that's been the focus, and I expect that, a majority of the ounces that will report into a maiden resource estimate would come out of those fault zones.
Well, actually, could you show us?
Yeah, sure. So I've pulled up a map here, which is of the Tenera deposit, and you can see the dark red zones in here, which are running north-south. They sit around those north-south fault zones. So you can see in here, we've actually peppered this one pretty heavily with drilling, seeing some really nice results out of there. Typical sort of material we're seeing out of it, 27.5 metres at 3.57 through that fault zone. We've picked up another one to the west here and a new one to the east. So we've drilled these 3 reasonably well, starting to do a bit more drilling on this eastern one. But you can see that they're sort of forming high-grade cores, if you like, within the deposit, and they sit in a sea of lower-grade material, which is in the main host rock. So these are all open along strike to the south and to the north, and, as I said, they're forming the basis of what we think is going to be a fairly healthy starting zone for open pit mining operation here. So that's been the focus, is to get a lot of drilling into these as quickly as possible. And, you can see the drilling distribution on those dots on this map. There's a lot of holes out in the south here, which are very widely spaced, but they've all got gold in them. So we've got a lot of work to do between now and the end of the year as well, to continue to infill and build that resource inventory as the year goes on.
These are big widths with these kind of, I say, high grade elements running through. Is that sort of typical of the region or Chile? Well,
the deposit itself is completely unusual for the region. So we're sitting in what's typically a copper IOCG style region. And I suppose, when we found this, we were looking outside the square a bit and on what other styles of deposit could exist, and did a lot of work on, I guess, the region, and came across our Zorro. And in this style of deposit, it's not unusual to have big, wide widths like this. But ultimately what it means is that this offers a great opportunity for a bulk open pit mining situation. So you're going to be looking at a global grade of 1 to 1.5 grams, but within it, you're sitting in these beautiful, nice, high-grade zones. The network tells us that a lot of that gold reports to the gravity circuit, so you get a really, really good upfront cash flow with lots of gold coming out early on in the processing, and all of these other benefits. And we're doing some work on that met now to tweak it and figure out if we can get some really big cost savings in the processing. And because once the deposit starts to offer up gravity recoverable gold, you all of a sudden have a few other options available to you on how you optimise that processing. So, the deposit and the project has got multiple options for everything at this stage. So you look at these high grade zones, they could be high grade, they've got underground potential at the end of an open pit. The Met looks like it's going to offer us some really good opportunities to optimise it further, plus the location of where the project sits. It's supported well by infrastructure. There's power nearby, water nearby, towns and workforces nearby, low altitude and all those things that it's got going for it. So it's giving our guys lots of work to do to figure out what the best pathway forward is, but we've got all those options at our fingertips, which I don't think a lot of other developers have got those options to actually go through. They're forced down a single pathway simply due to the nature of the deposit or their location.
I know you said it's an unusual deposit, but would you not have expected to see some copper in there?
Yes and no. There's a little bit of copper, but look, it's background. You know, I think our highest copper assay in the work that the multi-element work we've done is like 200 ppm. We're a fair way west of where the main copper trend is in the region, so probably another 30 to 40 kilometres west of the main Atacama fault system. But the formation of the gold deposit here is controlled by one of the same big regional structures that come off that fault system. So, you know, basically what these faults are doing is going down into the mantle of the earth, really, and generating a whole bunch of fluids and strange rocks that have got copper and gold in them. And in this case, it's gold only.
So, given you got a better understanding, how many holes have you done now?
I think we're up to about 185. We've just started. So,
okay. So you're starting to get a sense of what's there. It's all fairly shallow as well. I see. How do you go about optimizing the Maiden resource? Because people are going to be looking at that. That's the first, stake in the sand. It's the first sense of the scale here, and that's what you've got to show people.
Yeah, we will put a pit shell around it. We'll probably use a reasonably conservative gold price on that. It hasn't been decided yet. And looking at the met, which is good, we're not entirely sure what the cut-off rate will be yet, but, the higher the recovery, the lower cut-off you can go to and recover a majority of the metal that's in the deposit. So, this resource really is a stepping stone. It's going to be released really to map our trajectory forward for a couple of reasons. One, to demonstrate there's a real deposit here and we can start to look at some economics and scoping, and we'll aim to get a scoping study out later in the year. But also we're going to submit a whole bunch of information to the Chilean government to start the permitting process, and as part of that we need to give them some resource numbers. And as soon as we submit those resource numbers, they publish them for public review through their system. So obviously we've got some disclosure obligations around that. So we just want to get a number out there so we can start that and start compressing our time frame. But it's certainly going to demonstrate the scale and style of mineralisation that the deposit's got on offer.
Well, it'll show a certain scale. It won't necessarily be big. So you want to get that done sooner rather than later. I mean, is there a number that you're aiming for? Because if you don't come to market with more than 1 million ounces, people are like, so what?
Yeah, I don't think 1 million ounces would be great. And obviously there's a clear pathway to 1 million and beyond with this. And out of that 180 odd holes, I'm not sure what we'll end up including, but it might be around 150 holes. So there's going to be a lot of work to do to go to the next stage of resource size. But I think, more importantly, we just need to demonstrate there's a deposit here. It's recoverable. We can wrap a mine around it very easily, and it's in a world-class jurisdiction in a world-class location to develop a low-cost, low capex, low opex mine. Okay,
so remind me of the strategy then, because if it's not going to be 1 million ounces, you're saying to get this thing moving, we need to put a stake in the sand because we've got to submit some numbers to get the permits through, right? So what is that number going to look like? And then what more can we expect to see from you in what time frame?
Well, without stepping over the line with our disclosure obligations, I would say, conservatively, we're going to be over 500,000 ounces and under 1 million ounces. So somewhere in the middle.
750.
But look, but as we might be surprised. We don't know yet. I mean, we're doing the work, obviously, but we don't run the numbers until all the drilling's in. There's a lot of drilling outstanding to get into it yet. So, But look, I think I'm on the record as saying we can see a pathway to a deposit here that produces 100,000 ounces a year over a 10-year mine life out of an open pit. So, we can fairly clearly see that pathway ahead of us. We just need to get something out so we can get it moving, and we can start to talk about the economics publicly then as well. Because at the moment, we're not allowed to do that because we haven't published a resource. And people like to know that sort of information. So that's what we're working on.
Okay. So what does it look like post the publication of the Maiden resource? What do you have to do? What are you going to do? Because tell us.
Yeah, I think what we'll see this resource will have a boundary around it, and there's going to be a lot of drilling outside of that boundary that's got some pretty big hits. We'll be able to demonstrate, well, that's all going to get infilled. This is what we've done, and this is what you can expect to see going forward. And also, we'll be able to then wrap some scoping numbers around it. We'll have new met work in our hands. So we'll be able to optimise that pathway for the metallurgy, plug that into a scoping study with, and start to show what sort of scale we're going to need to actually build a mine here, and kick off all of our permitting, of course. And during all of this, we'll still be drilling. So we're actually budgeted and scheduled to drill right through to the end of the year this year.
Okay. So
to continue to grow that resource.
Right, which is important. But again, so come back to the question of, so remind me what the strategy is. Is it like get into production at the earliest opportune moment because you've got something there? Because when I speak to geos and CEOs, they know within months what they've a sense of what they've got there, right? But they're not allowed to say it.
Yeah, and look, we've got a sense of what we've got, but literally, honestly, we've got no idea of how big this ultimately is going to be. We haven't found the ends of it. We haven't found the edges of it. The more we drill away, the more gold we're finding. We've got drilling on other targets that are close by that are all part of the same system. So we have Tenera East. We've drilled a couple of holes into that already. Had some attractive looking material in it. We haven't got the assays back yet. If Tenera East comes in, then that actually sits in the hanging wall of Tenera and changes everything because all of a sudden there's a change in the stripping ratio because instead of moving waste, you've got an ore body sitting in your hanging wall. And Drone Hill is probably sitting in the footwall. We're doing a bit more work on that now. And Drone Hill's had one hole in it, which returned, I think it was 15 metres at 1.13, and the geos think they missed. So there's a lot of upside outside of Tenera to add more ounces as well. And as the year goes on, we're going to be drilling those other targets and drilling all those other extensions. And look, we're hopeful and optimistic that Tenera joins to all those other targets and we end up just with one big deposit.
Right. I think that's to my point, which is you and your team's track record. You're mine builders. Okay. So you're looking at this as building a mine. Right now, as you see it, do you believe you've got yourself a mine? Can you build a mine around what you know today? I get all the upside stuff. That's brilliant, but...
Yeah, we probably have. There's probably enough in the ground there to build a mine.
Right.
But it's not going to be producing 100,000 ounces a year.
Right. Okay.
Is the upshot of it. And obviously,
So let's be clear about this, because I'm sorry to dig at you here, but it's the conversations I have off record with all you boys, where you know what you've got really early on, and then it takes you 2 years to be able to tell the market, right? So which is fine. But for people who've built mines before, I trust them just a little bit more. Is you're not going to be able to do 100,000 ounces a year based on what the drilling tells you today. Got it. But with the hit rates that you've been having with your drilling, with the numbers you're sort of seeing, if you continue to get more of the same, yeah, I know you've got the extent of the ore body, but is that where your head's at? Get into production sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and we'll do it in a logical time frame, and that's why we want to get a number out so that we can really push hard on that permitting process. The permitting is going to be the time constraint on getting a mine into production at El Zorro. As I said, we believe we have the makings of a mine on our hands. We don't know how big that's going to be yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this initial resource, kick off all of that permitting. So it's usually a 3 to 4 year period in Chile to do that. But we've already started a lot of that work. So we're already, compressing it. We're going to compress it some more by starting some other work to do with that permitting. And so that by the time this resource gets to a size where we can, that we decide, okay, well, that's now what we want to do a feasibility study on, which we hopefully will be kick off early next year. By the time we finish feasibility, we're not too far away from making a decision to mine with the permit in our hands. Rather than get through fees and then someone says, oh, we better get a permit, and then you've added another 4 years onto your development pathway. So we're running all these processes in parallel, basically to bring this to production at a scale that makes sense as quickly as possible.
Remind me again, how much does your management team put into this company in terms of dollars? Not what percentage, not cheap stock. How many dollars have you put in?
Prior to listing, around about 2.5 million Aussie dollars. Yeah, so we funded it ourselves privately from 2017 to probably about end of 2018, a couple of years. And then we did a private raising and a whole bunch of drilling at Tenerife. That's when we sort of broke the geological puzzle, if you like. So once we became listed, we pretty well haven't stopped drilling now. We're into resource drilling straight away, more or less.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to politics a little bit. I think the market reaction is, at the moment, for Chilean projects, not just yours, across the board, for people who have, international or foreign investment into Chile, has been a little bit muted. They're a bit nervous. But do you think the stock is going to just move sideways until after the elections, or do you think some of the things that you're going could actually move this?
Oh, look, I know there's a lot of interest in the stock. Just they haven't made the decision to get buying just yet. So, as I said, we can't control when that happens, although I do see that we've had some reasonable volumes and upticks in our share price over the last week or so, which is a positive. But look, I think you're right. You throw the Chilean perceived situation into the mix with, a subdued gold sector. There's no doubt all the gold stocks have come off pretty heavily the last couple of months. But we're starting to see some interest come back there. And Tesoro lost the exploration excitement and hype, and everyone went, oh, they've punched out another 100-gram metre intercept, another 100-gram metre intercept. Oh, it's resource definition drilling, and it's just wandered down. So I think once we start to attract more medium-term money back onto the register and through the market, because people are seeing that there's a real project here. This is no longer an exploration project, it's a resource definition and development project. Then, we'll start to see some value come back into the stock. And look, I've been told that, at this level, it's cheap. So, and I think, people are probably starting to buy it now. That's why there's been a bit of an increase in volume with an increase in price the last week or so. But, I think we spoke before, even in the booming market, compared to our Australian peers, I think the Pacific Ocean causes a discount between the Australian investors, which is the majority of our register, of course, and Chile.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't mention tax loss season. It seems to be what's happening at the moment in Oz too. Yeah,
well, that happens a lot, and I don't think there's many charts that look too dissimilar to ours over the last couple of months. So, we're not orphans.